Part 6. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 51. It turns out that Lu Xiru really has something else to say. You know your man is sicker than anyone else, but you still dare to run out and hang around. Maybe you are sick now. Do you want to drag others down? Do you hope that the whole courtyard will fail the exam? Lu Xiru found another tricky point to attack Xiao Cai. The people who were watching the excitement around them all took several steps back after hearing this, and looked at Xiao Cai as if they were looking at something dirty. After all, the reason why they are still here now is to fight for the status of a scholar. The second exam has not started yet, and no one dares to get sick. Xiao Cai hurriedly said, "Who said my man is sicker than anyone else? He just got cold outside. It's a cold, not a human. Am I not fine now?" Although she said so, no one dared to approach her. Except for Lu Xiru, who was arguing with her directly, everyone else stayed in a position where they could hear the sound but could not catch the saliva and watch the excitement. Since Lu Xiru lost her husband and mother-in-law, she has shown a talent far beyond ordinary people in quarreling. You didn't ask a doctor, so who knows if he can survive? Besides, you look fine now, but that doesn't mean you will always be fine. Who knows if you are sick and just trying to hold on? I think your face looks wrong now. Little Cai's nose was crooked with anger. But the onlookers were still joining in the fun. I think her complexion is really not right. She is blushing. Is she having a fever? We should stay away from her. She is too much. She is still busy seducing men even though she has such a fever. Listening to these pointing fingers, Xiao Cai said, "I blushed because I was angry with her. I don't have a fever. I don't want to seduce men. I don't like Gu Mingda." Lu Xiru said sarcastically, "People who are sick like to say that they are not sick, right, right, you like Zhang Guangzong, that bald head, you don't like Gu Mingda." Xiao Cai was so angry that she wanted to punch her directly, but in front of so many people, she would be even more unreasonable if she really did it. She couldn't argue with Lu Xiru, so she could only continue to use force on Zhang Yuniang. She didn't even dare to look at Gu Mingda anymore, for fear of being labeled a whore again. "Sister, didn't you say you would take care of it? You just watch me being bullied. I am your legitimate sister-in-law," Xiao Cai said with a look of grievance. Lu Xiru was a little nervous when she heard this. Although Zhang Yuniang hated Zhang Guangzong, they were a family after all, and she was just a foster sister. Zhang Yuniang said directly to Xiao Cai, "You also know that they are relatives, so why do you care about something you shouldn't care about?" Xiao Cai didn't get help from her sister-in-law, but got a heavy hammer from her sister-in-law. But Lu Xiru was very happy. Her nonsense was recognized by Zhang Yuniang, and she felt more and more that they were a family. Although Xiao Cai was humiliated, she still knew that Zhang Guangzong was her support, and said again, "Sister, Guangzong is still in the room with a fever. Even if you want to scold me, you have to cure his illness first." Lu Xiru continued to act as Zhang Yuniang's mouthpiece, saying, "You are acting again, as if you really care about his life or death." After so much trouble, Xiao Cai's label of not caring about Zhang Guangzong's life or death has almost been firmly attached to her head. Xiao Cai had said all her words of defense, and it seemed that it was useless. She simply stopped talking and looked at Zhang Yuniang pleadingly, "Sister, please hire a doctor for Guangzong. We have spent all our money. Do you want to watch him burn to death?" Zhang Yuniang shook her head and said, "We are not well off." When Xiao Cai heard this, she cried again on the spot, saying, "They are obviously siblings, but you eat and drink well, but you don't care about your brother's life or death. You have such a cruel heart." Zhang Yuniang had the patience to listen to her crying, but Lu Xiru couldn't stand it and scolded her on the spot. After the two had almost finished arguing, Zhang Yuniang said, "We are familiar with a bank in the prefecture, and we are willing to mediate and help you borrow some money. If you pay it back within 3 months, you only need to pay half a cent of interest." People who originally thought that the Gu family couple were cruel turned their heads and asked, "What bank is so kind with such low interest?" The interest of a bank lending money is not low. A cent of interest a month is already considered a conscientious bank. In some places, the interest of a bank is high enough to kill people. If it is overdue for 3 months, the interest can be higher than the principal. Gu Mingda explained, "I have an old relationship with the shopkeeper, so I can do this guarantee. Today, I helped my brother-in-law to guarantee, but I am afraid that the favor between me and the shopkeeper will be gone." Gu Mingdan naturally saw that some people in the crowd were ready to take the opportunity to borrow money. He said this first at this time, and also told them that the favor had been spent, and naturally they could not borrow such a low interest later. Zhang Yuniang also sighed, "It's rare that someone remembers our kindness. I wanted to borrow some money from the bank to do business, but now it seems that I can't." Everyone present expressed regret and said that they had done their best for their brother-in-law. But Xiao Cai didn't buy it and said, "Why should I borrow money from the bank? Why should I pay interest? You have money, why don't you lend it to me?" This is that she has made up her mind to rely on Gu Mingda and his wife, and she has obviously made up her mind not to pay back the money. Otherwise, a normal person would be overjoyed to hear half a cent of interest. After hearing these words that raised her blood pressure, Lu Xiru could no longer hold back and slapped him. "Why are there so many reasons? I have 2 hands, why shouldn't I hit you?" After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 52. After the slap, the whole audience was just stunned for a moment. After all, it was Lu Xiru who hit the person. Well, this makes sense. Of course, even if it was Zhang Yuniang who beat someone, they would probably only think it was reasonable. As the most influential figures in this house, Lu Xiru and Zhang Yuniang are completely half-sisters in the eyes of everyone. They are all jealous, with just one word, reckless. Little Cai, on the other hand, had only been in this house for a few days, and no one else was willing to let her play with her. Therefore, she had no idea that Lu Xiru was a woman who beat her mother-in-law and husband until they cried for father and mother. "You hit me, how dare you hit me? Who gave you the courage?" Little Cai hasn't finished speaking yet. There was a pop sound. Another slap fell hard on her face. 2 red slap marks were visible to the naked eye on little Cai's face. I don't know if it was Xiao Cai's illusion, but she always felt that Lu Xiru's slap seemed to be stronger than Zhang Guangzong's, and the slap was more painful. "I can fight if I want to, I don't need anyone to give me the courage." Lu Xiru still felt unsatisfied after the treatment. She always felt like something was missing. Whatever comes to mind. 6-year-old Gu Zhao dragged a broom over and shouted, "Aunt Lu, you didn't take anything." After getting the broom, Lu Xiru was like Sun Wukong getting the golden cudgel. It was very obvious that he was more powerful than a tiger. He chased the little Cai family with the broom and beat him all over the yard. Finally, he had a chance to deal with this evil woman. If Lu Xiru didn't give her a good beating, how could he avenge her for abusing Niuniu? Zhang Yuniang acted as if she didn't see the commotion in the yard, and said righteously in front of everyone, "Although my sister-in-law has evil intentions and did not respect me as a sister-in-law in the past, Guangzong is my half-brother after all. Even if his mother never treated me well, even if he never regarded me as his biological sister, I can't ignore him. After all, as a eldest sister, this is what I should do." Zhang Yuniang had no intention of hiding anything for Zhang Guangzong and his wife. The young Cai family had made such a fuss and made their demands for money obvious. Of course, She also wanted to explain clearly the grudges between the two families. Zhang Yuniang deliberately concealed the fact that Niu Niu was adopted by Xiao Cai. Even though Xiao Cai and Zhang Guangzhou never treated Niu Niu kindly, after all, they had raised Niu Niu for 5 years. Outsiders did not know that Niu Niu had a difficult life in those 5 years, and they would only morally kidnap her now. Niu Niu thinks that children should remember gratitude. Zhang Yuniang didn't want her precious daughter to fall into the position of being criticized at all. Fortunately, now all of Xiao Cai's energy is involved in Lu Xiru, and she can't get distracted and interrupt at all. Zhang Yuniang turned to look at MRSGN tenderly, and said very politely, "Mother-in-law, you are a local. Please help my brother find a doctor. Don't worry about money." MRSGN glanced at Gu Mingde, and when he nodded, she no longer hesitated and turned around and walked out. Madame Qi came over and, relying on their good relationship, said proactively, "Ms. Gu, since your sister-in-law is unwilling to borrow money from the bank, why not give me this half-profit opportunity? I promise to be grateful to you. 3 months and a half interest is equivalent to borrowing 150 taels of silver. After 3 months, you only need to pay back 105 taels of silver. 5 taels of silver may seem like a lot, but in fact most of the banks on the market lend money at a profit of 2 cents per month. If you borrow money for 3 months, you have to pay back at least 160 taels. It is no different from robbery. Ordinary people can only borrow money as a last resort, and will not borrow money from banks. Not to mention the capital city, even in the lower counties and towns, they had never heard of a 3-month half-profit bank. It happened that MRSG's family was in a hurry to use money, so they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity. Zhang Yuniang gave a bitter smile and said, "MSG, it's not that I won't help you, but my brother has to borrow the money even if he doesn't want to borrow it. Now I'm going to ask Granny Qian to go out and ask for a doctor. In a moment, my husband-in-law will invite the shopkeeper of the bank to your door. My brother is sick, but it doesn't affect his fingerprints." Madame Qi immediately understood that she was going to ask the Zhang family to borrow money forcibly, so it was hard to bring up her own affairs. Gu Mingde handed the child to Zhang Yuniang and hurried out. After the doctor prescribed medicine, he walked in with a middle-aged man with a mustache. The man was wearing a blue gown and a black hat. Gu Mingde called him Shopkeeper Zheng. Shopkeeper Zheng looked arrogant when facing others, and he always looked indifferent when greeting him. Some people shyly asked for a half-cent loan, but he rejected them all with a cold face. Only when facing Gu Mingde, Shopkeeper Zheng would smile. "My younger brother is sick. Could you please help the shopkeeper put his fingerprints on him?" Gu Mingde said. Shopkeeper Zheng didn't think there was anything wrong with this. After taking the money, he pressed Zhang Guangzong's finger on the IOU. Little Cai was beaten to a disgrace by Lu Xiru. If the doctor hadn't arrived in time, Lu Xiru would have continued to beat her. When the doctor was treating Zhang Guangzong, little MSCAI huddled in the corner of the room. When shopkeeper Zheng came in, she wanted to run away, but the door was blocked, so she could only continue to stay in the corner like a quail. "I won't lend money, even if it's only half a penny of profit," little Cai shouted. Lu Xiru's voice was louder than hers, "Your man is dying and you don't save him. You are the one who really wants him to die." The sound was so loud that Zhang Guangzong, who was so dizzy with fever, heard it and struggled to raise his hand, as if he wanted to say something. Lu Xiru took one look and immediately continued to shout through the loudspeaker, "Look, your man is so angry with you." Xiao Cai was furious, but she still hid and refused to put her fingerprints on the IOU. Zhang Yuniang gave Lu Xiru a look, and the two of them, one on the left and one on the right, directly held Xiao Cai and grabbed her hand to put her fingerprints. The IOU now has the fingerprints of both husband and wife, so even if they want to deny it, they can't hide. The doctor collected the medical expenses, and Gu Mingde asked the doctor to write a receipt for the money. The money was spent in real money, so the doctor naturally did not refuse. There were still many people watching the excitement in the yard. Zhang Yuniang handed over the bank IOU, the medical expenses receipt, and the remaining silver to Xiao Cai in front of everyone, and calculated the account again in front of everyone. The doctor spent 3 taels of silver, and borrowed a total of 10 taels of silver. Now the extra 7 taels of silver is for the couple to spend in the capital city. Little Cai held the silver in her hand, but she still refused to pay. This account is wrong, the couple teamed up to take my money. But today's account is clear, and the bank owner and the doctor have not left yet. Mrs. Zhang, what do you think is wrong? Is it the medical expenses or the money I lent? If you really can't figure it out, I'll calculate it for you again, Manager Zhang said with narrowed eyes. Little Cai said, no, none of them are right. You and Gu Mingde are in the same group, of course you help him. You forced me to press my fingerprints, you don't have good intentions. Before Manager Zhang spoke, the doctor's face turned cold and said, Mrs. Zhang, your husband is so sick, and you keep asking for good medicine. I have been practicing medicine in this area for more than 10 years. Who in the neighborhood doesn't know my reputation? 3 taels of silver is already the lowest price. If you think I'm cheating you, you can just not treat him. The doctor turned into the room and was about to take the medicine back. Xiao Cai hurriedly stopped him and said a lot of nice things before finally calming him down. After the doctor was coaxed, Manager Zhang spoke again, Mrs. Zhang, how much money I lent is clearly written in black and white. You are talking nonsense and tarnishing my innocent reputation. Let's go to the officials now and let the adults in the government office judge it. My dears, there are many things to do today, so I will only update this time. I will update twice a day next month. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 53. When the money shop owner said the words clean reputation, everyone just laughed. Money shops are a bunch of ruthless people, how can there be any clean reputation? But Xiao Cai was really scared by this sentence. Although Zhang Yuniang forced the couple to sign the IOU, the money actually went into their hands. The interest was far from being usury. If it really went to the government office, Xiao Cai would definitely be the unlucky one. Zhang Yuniang coughed lightly, put on the posture of an elder sister again, and scolded, shameful thing, if you really want your man to die, just say it, then I will go to your Cai family to ask why you married a scourge like you to our Zhang family. Xiao Cai was suppressed by these people one after another, and she was no match at all. She could only curl up in the corner with the silver. Gu Mingde sent the old doctor and the shopkeeper Zheng out of the house together. As soon as the old doctor left the house, he said, I've never seen a more cunning woman than this. After that, he flicked his sleeves and left angrily with his medicine box. Gu Mingde turned to look at shopkeeper Zheng, and said apologetically, Brother Zheng, I'm sorry for your trouble in making this trip because of my family affairs. Shopkeeper Zheng chuckled and said, you are being too polite. With our relationship, such a small matter is nothing. Gu Mingde said, Brother Zheng will ask someone to send this IOU back to Guang'an County. Most likely, the branch of the bank in Guang'an County will ask for debt collection. Shopkeeper Zheng nodded to show that he knew, and said, it's a pity that Mingde is so focused on the imperial examination. Otherwise, the branch manager of Guang'an County would be none other than you. Until now, the young master is still looking forward to you coming to our bank to work. Brother Zheng, the young master is too kind to me. I am ashamed to accept it, Gu Mingde said modestly. Gu Mingda escorted the person all the way to the entrance of the alley before turning back. As soon as he turned around, he saw Na Yunio peeking out of the door of the house. As soon as he saw his daughter, the corners of his mouth could not help but rise. He quickened his pace and walked to the child, and asked softly, "Na Yunio, are you waiting for daddy here?" Na Yunio nodded. Gu Mingda picked up the child and said, "Why are you waiting here alone?" Na Yunio said softly, "Not alone, my eldest brother and third brother are with me." Gu Mingda looked behind Na Yunio and saw Gu Yan and Gu Zhao not far away. Gu Zhao was looking for insects in the bushes beside him, and Gu Yan was holding a book in his hand, looking at his younger brother and sister from time to time. Gu Mingda walked in with the child in his arms. As soon as he approached Gu Yan immediately stood up straight. "You are a good brother," Gu Mingda said. Gu Yan still looked calm when he heard his father's praise, but his slightly red earlobes revealed his inner excitement. Gu Mingda held Na Yunio and sat down beside him, and asked softly, "What do you want to do with your father?" Na Yunio lowered her head slightly, and for the first time, her young face showed a tangled look. She didn't speak, and Gu Mingda didn't urge her, but said, "Na Yunio, I am your father. Daddy told you that your parents will always protect you." Na Yunio raised her head, her big eyes were wet, like a ignorant deer in the forest. Gu Mingda looked at his daughter's pitiful appearance, and he wanted to kill her. Since he and Yuniang recognized this child as their daughter, they decided to protect her for life. How could they bear to see her like this? "Who wronged you? Tell daddy, and daddy will take care of it for you." Na Yunio shook her head and said softly, "Na Yunio didn't feel wronged, Na Yunio just felt that she was wronged." Huh. Gu Mingda didn't quite understand why the child suddenly blamed herself, so he said, "You didn't feel wronged from others, which made daddy very happy, but now you are wronging yourself, and daddy will feel sad with you." Na Yunio heard this, her eyes widened, her mouth slightly opened, and she hesitated for a long time before asking, "Dad, will Zhang's father die?" Gu Mingda was stunned, and finally knowing the crux of the problem, he shook his head and said, "The doctor prescribed medicine for him. If he can survive tonight, it should be fine." Na Yunio breathed a sigh of relief and asked, "The old parents of the Zhang family don't treat me as a family member. Shouldn't I miss them?" Gu Mingda asked, "Do you want to go back to the Zhang family?" Na Yunio immediately shook her head like a rattle and cried directly, "I don't want to go back, Dad, don't send me back." Gu Mingda hurriedly comforted her, "No, no, you are your parents' precious daughter. Your parents can't live without you, how can they send you back?" Na Yunio breathed a sigh of relief when she heard this. "Then do you hope that the old parents of the Zhang family will live better than your mother and I?" Gu Mingda asked again. Na Yunio immediately said, "I don't expect that. I like you guys the most." Gu Mingda smiled and said, "Then you don't miss them either." Na Yunio tilted her head and said in confusion, "But I don't want Zhang's father to die of illness. Although he was not good to me before, I don't want him to die in my heart. Am I doing this very bad?" Gu Mingda patted her little head and said, "It's normal not to want someone to die casually. Even if it's a stranger, you won't curse someone to death? What's more, he is someone you know." Na Yunio relaxed visibly. Gu Mingda suddenly seemed to understand something and asked, "My silly child, are you sad because of this?" Na Yunio whispered, "I'm afraid you think I can't raise you well." Gu Mingda frowned slightly, "Who taught you the 3 words can't be raised well?" Na Yunio didn't realize that her father was angry, and said directly, "I heard Aunt San tell someone." Gu Mingda didn't have the habit of getting angry in front of children. He suppressed his emotions and said, "What adults say is not necessarily right. Don't take your Aunt San's words to heart. Your parents didn't raise you to be well trained, nor do they expect your return." Such words were difficult for Na Yunio to understand with her little brain, but she still plucked up the courage to ask, Why are you willing to raise me? Why are you willing to share the food at home with me? Niu always felt that this was a big deal. She wanted to ask Zhang Yuniang several times, but she didn't dare to say it out loud. Gu Mingde vaguely sensed the little girl's deepest anxiety, took out a handkerchief, and gently wiped the tears on the little girl's face that had fallen at some point. Why do we raise Niu? Because Niu is your good baby. Your parents are willing to give Niu the best food, and they will protect your good baby to grow up well. Niu said with red eyes, but I am not your biological child, I am a wild child picked up. Gu Mingde looked at her gently and said, Niu was originally your child, but she took the wrong path before and entered someone else's belly. Niu searched for a long time before returning to her parents. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 54. Zhang Guangzong's illness seems to be more serious than everyone imagined. Even after taking medicine, he still suffered from fever for a whole day and night. Zhang Guangzong was so sick that he felt uncomfortable all over, as if his whole body was about to be burned. He couldn't even remember the last time he had such a serious fever. At this moment, he just felt tortured by the illness, and his desire to live seemed not to be that strong anymore. Little Cai had been urging him to sleep for a while, but once he closed his eyes, he felt that heat was constantly coming out of his body, and even breathing became difficult. Nowhere in his body seemed to be comfortable. All night long, he couldn't sleep. He had never felt that time was so long. He quietly felt that his body seemed to be declining. When a ray of light appeared on the horizon, Zhang Guangzong finally fell asleep. The fever is gone. The fever is gone. Little Cai's exclamation made Zhang Guangzong wake up easily. He had no memory of what he had dreamed about. He only felt extremely tired, as if he hadn't closed his eyes for several days and was in desperate need of sleep. But after he was woken up, no matter how sleepy he was, he couldn't fall asleep. Just because the fever is gone does not mean that the disease is cured. Feeling sleepy but unable to sleep, feeling heavy but unable to escape, these two kinds of pain were intertwined, making Zhang Guangzong feel that life was worse than death again. According to this situation, he may not be able to participate in the sub-examination in a few days. Whether it was physical discomfort or the pain of missing out on fame, Zhang Guangzong was suffering. Naturally, he would not blame himself, but would direct all his resentment at the source he thought was the source. Little Cai. He felt that everything was his wife's fault, from the bowl of champion soup she couldn't prepare for him to the rain she picked up instead of giving him an umbrella. With such a mood, even though he was so sick that it was difficult to sit up, he still did not forget to torment little Cai. The medicine is too hot. Blow it off, Zhang Guangzong said feebly. Xiao Cai first knew that he was wrong, and secondly, he had been resigned to it for many years. He had long been accustomed to Zhang Guangzong's bad temper and did not dare to resist at first. He said the medicine was hot, so Mr. Cai tried his best to cool it down. He said that the medicine had cooled down, so Xiao Cai turned on the stove to heat it again. Zhang Guangzong couldn't finish the food, but he fell to the ground. He then forced little Cai to lie on the ground like a dog and eat it all, but little Cai couldn't bear it. Zhang Guangzong didn't have the strength to hit her, so he started to pinch her, pinching little Cai's thigh until it was bruised. But the more she tolerated it, the more Zhang Guangzong became more and more aggressive. His mentality was distorted and he became more tormented. Even if he is a tough guy, he can't bear it, not to mention that little Cai is still a soft guy with no morals. The man at home goes crazy day by day, but the man outside is gentle, carefree, and generous. Little Mr. Cai was originally good-looking, and she was also popular among everyone in Qingshui village. Little Cai was isolated by almost all the women in the house because of Lu Xiru's words of seduce men. They were all afraid that Mr. Cai would fail to seduce Gu Mingde and would turn to seduce their own men. Fukin is a vast city with many people, and a beautiful and heelless out-of-town woman, even if she just goes out to buy groceries every day, is enough to attract the attention of local snakes. On the second day after Zhang Guangzong's fever subsided, Xiao Cai was entangled by a group of rogues who took advantage of her while shopping for groceries. Just like what was written in the storybook, in a moment of tension, the hero who saved the beauty fell from the sky. Although this hero was a bit arrogant and looked a bit ordinary, the stimulation at that moment made little Cai's heart beat a little faster. The hero claims to be a native of Fukin. He owns a large house in Fukin and runs a small business that earns him 100 taels a month. Zhang Yuniang didn't know that her brother's wife was about to run away from him because of his illness. She was busy checking the test basket for Gu Mingde. Ever since she learned about the incidents that happened in the first exam, Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but feel frightened. She finally finished the first exam safely, for fear that her husband would miss the opportunity due to some mistakes. The results of the first exam came out, and Gu Mingde's name was ranked first. Although Zhang Guangzong ranked lower, he still passed the exam. However, in his current situation, he was unable to take the exam. In addition to him, most of the scholars from the same school who went to the examination room with Gu Mingde that morning also passed the exam. Those who had passed the exam felt that Gu Mingde's encouragement before entering the exam room was of great significance. They came to thank Gu Mingde one after another and hoped that they would still go with Gu Mingde for the second exam. Of the 4 people who were guarantors with Gu Mingde, only Zheng Qi passed the exam. He was almost framed for cheating due to a moment of negligence. Now that he is only one step away from getting the title of scholar, he is naturally grateful to Gu Mingde. Gu Mingde unknowingly gathered a group of people around him. If it had been anyone else, I'm afraid they would have become overwhelmed by the compliments and gratitude, but Gu Mingde still took it indifferently. He is already 34 years old and is not a young man. The most important thing to him now is his wife and children behind him. He must obtain a good name in the examination. Gu Mingde still got up very early, finished breakfast leisurely, and drank the zhuangyuan soup prepared by his wife early. Niu Niu on the bed did not wake up suddenly this time, but collapsed on the bed and slept soundly. Gu Mingde remembered clearly that Niu Niu's sleeping posture seemed a bit reserved before. Even in her sleep, she was very well behaved and would never take up too much space. Since he talked with the child, Gu Mingde clearly felt that the little girl's uneasiness seemed to have disappeared. Similarly, her sleeping posture became strange. She would talk in her sleep, move around in her dreams, and her sleeping posture was not very honest. She dared to make requests and clamored to sleep in Zhang Yuniang's arms every night. Although Gu Mingde and Zhang Yuniang might be woken up by Niu Niu in the middle of the night, neither of them blamed Niu Niu. They tucked her in the quilt every time and continued to sleep soundly. She sleeps very deeply, Gu Mingde suddenly said. Zhang Yuniang immediately looked at her daughter on the bed. Gu Mingde took advantage of this time to lower his head and gently kiss Zhang Yuniang on the cheek. Zhang Yuniang turned her head and looked at him coquettishly. Wait until I come back. After saying this, Gu Mingde turned around and took the exam basket and strode out of the door. Together with many scholars waiting, he walked towards the familiar examination room with lanterns. Zhang Yuniang watched her husband disappear in the yard, turned around and hastily cleaned up the dishes on the table, and suddenly felt sleepy. Seeing that it was still dark, she took off her coat and climbed onto the bed, and took Niu Niu into her arms. Niu Niu felt like she had fallen into a warm embrace in her sleep, and she continued to talk in her sleep without even opening her eyes. Delicious, so fragrant. Zhang Yuniang gently pinched the little girl's face. Little greedy cat, you dream of eating. Niu Niu suddenly twisted her body, as if she was angry with someone in her dream, and said loudly, my father is the first. If he says he is the first, he is the first. As soon as these words came out, Zhang Yuniang was so shocked that she lost most of her sleepiness. Second update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 55. The daughter said in her sleep that her husband would get the first place in the exam, but Zhang Yuniang was not happy at all. Every word of her daughter's wish had a price to pay. Compared with the advantage she could get, Zhang Yuniang was more afraid of the unknown price. Although her daughter looked healthy and safe now, who knew if fate was hiding in the dark and accumulating strength, waiting to explode. Nayunia was still shouting, "Not just this time, there is also." Zhang Yuniang hurriedly woke the child up. She didn't dare to let her daughter continue to shout. Nayunia opened her eyes, looked at her mother with a confused face, and asked, "Mom, did I oversleep?" Nayunia thought she slept until the sun shone on her butt, but the light in the room was not bright, and she could only vaguely see Zhang Yuniang's face. Zhang Yuniang touched her little head and asked, "Is Nayunia dreaming? What did you dream about?" Nayunia nodded in confusion and said, "I dreamed of an old man with a white beard who said that daddy could only get second place in the exam this time. I said no, my daddy must be first, and I must be first every time, but I woke up before I finished speaking. I don't know when I will see him next time." Nayunia looked aggrieved. Zhang Yuniang said softly, "Nayunia, do you remember what your parents taught you before?" Nayunia tilted her head and said, "My parents taught me a lot of truths, and Nayunia remembers them all." "What if it's something your parents want?" Zhang Yuniang asked. Nayunia said softly, "What your parents want, your parents said you want to fight for it yourself, and don't let me help you make a wish in your heart." Zhang Yuniang didn't expect that she actually remembered it. Nayunia immediately added, "This time I didn't make a wish in my heart, I made a wish in my dream." Looking at the cunning look in her little girl's eyes, Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but feel a little funny. She didn't argue with her daughter about the relationship between in the dream and in the heart, but said directly, "Then Nayunia, don't make a wish for your parents in your dreams in the future, okay? We agreed that your parents will fight for what they want. Even if your father didn't pass the exam in the end, it was because he didn't study well. He wouldn't blame others." Nayunia nodded obediently and said, "I remember." Zhang Yuniang looked at her obedient and cute appearance, couldn't help but kiss her little face, and said, "It's still early, you sleep a little longer." Nayunia shook her head and said, "I can't sleep, I want to get up." Zhang Yuniang didn't force it, and picked up the clothes beside the bed and wanted to put them on her. Niu shook her head, "I want to dress myself, I can dress myself." Niu did everything in the Zhang family, and she learned to dress herself by herself under the abuse of Xiao Cai and Mrscai. Zhang Yuniang dressed her gently and said, "Mother likes to dress Niu doesn't like mother to help dress her." Niu was stunned. When she was in the Zhang family, she didn't know how much she envied Jinbao. The whole family revolved around him, and she didn't need to do anything by herself. Every day, Xiao Cai did everything for her to dress and comb her hair. After helping her put on her clothes, Zhang Yuniang picked up the comb beside her and gently combed her hair, asking, "Do you want to comb one small tuft or two small tufts today?" Perhaps because Gu Mingda's words yesterday untied her knot, Nayunia couldn't help but have a strange idea in her mind. "I want to comb 5, 2 in front and 3 in the back, mother, is it okay? Will it be troublesome?" Although Zhang Yuniang thought this idea was strange, she would not refuse her daughter's request and said, "We got up early today, so we can spend the whole morning combing our hair." Nayunia nestled in Zhang Yuniang's arms and smiled sweetly. She really enjoyed the time with her mother. She felt warm and at ease in her heart, as if she was wrapped in soft clouds. When it was bright, Guyan got up and started reading in the morning. Other readers might get up to read at the crowing of the cock, but Gu Mingdan never liked Guyan to read too early in the morning. The light in the morning was not very good. Even if you lit a candle, it was not as bright as in the daytime. Gu Mingde had seen many scholars who had damaged their eyes because of studying too hard. Therefore, although he hoped that his son would work hard, he did not want him to work hard to the point of damaging his body. After Zhang Yuniang finished taking care of Na Yuniu's hair, she began to prepare breakfast for the 3 children. Na Yuniu followed Zhang Yuniang like a little tail. She wanted to help her mother cook, but was stopped by Zhang Yuniang. Mom is busy and doesn't need your help. Your 2 brothers didn't help. You can just watch from the side, Zhang Yuniang said with a smile. Na Yuniu said, but my brother is a boy and I am a girl. Shouldn't girls do these things? Zhang Yuniang insisted on this matter. She and Gu Mingde had already reached an agreement on this matter. They had 4 children. Even if Gu Mingde didn't take the imperial examination, he would not be short of money, so he would not treat the children differently. Since the generation of Mrs. Gu, the Gu family has not been a family that favors boys over girls. Although girls will get married sooner or later, they are still their own flesh and blood. Na Yuniu may have to do these things in the future, but the couple hopes not before marriage. If Na Yuniu can study in the future, Gu Mingde will also work hard to cultivate her into a talented woman so that she does not have to be trapped in the trivial matters of the inner house for her whole life. Brothers are the children of our parents, and you are also their child. There is nothing you should or shouldn't do. You should share the work equally in the future. If you really want to help your mother with work now, go call your 2 brothers over and I will divide the work for you, Zhang Yuniang said. Na Yuniu's eyes widened slightly, and after hesitating for a long time, she said, forget it. The eldest brother was reading and the 3rd brother was sleeping. Na Yuniu felt that these were very important things and didn't want to disturb them. Zhang Yuniang nodded. It was just making breakfast. It was not hard at all. Compared with other women, her life was actually very easy. And when she turned around, she could see her daughter sitting obediently beside her with a sweet smile on her face. Zhang Yuniang took out an egg, cracked it and poured it carefully into the bowl, sprinkled a few grains of salt into it, and then poured it with the hot water that had just boiled. The egg liquid was washed away and floated in the bowl like a flower, exuding a mouth-watering fragrance. You must be hungry after getting up so early. Eat the egg flowers first. Zhang Yuniang handed the bowl to Na Yuniu. Na Yuniu used to envy Jinbei for eating egg flowers frequently. When she was at the old Gu family, Zhang Yuniang couldn't cook for her, but after entering the capital, she would make her a bowl of hot egg flowers almost every morning. Na Yuniu was used to eating it, but at this time she suddenly asked, my brothers didn't eat egg flowers, so should I not eat it too? First update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 56. This question of using one's own spear to attack another's shield was not difficult for Zhang Yuniang at all. She quietly covered her partiality with a layer of cloak and said, your 2 brothers didn't accompany me all morning. When I was working, I turned around and saw Na Yuniu accompanying me. I didn't know how happy I was. This bowl of egg flowers is my reward for my good child. Na Yuniu was only 5 years old and was easily fooled by Zhang Yuniang. While eating the egg flowers, she was still immersed in the joy of being praised by her mother as a good child. But after eating the egg flowers, Na Yuniu touched her stomach and said, Mom, I don't want to eat breakfast. Zhang Yuniang was slightly surprised to hear this and asked, are you full with a bowl of egg flowers? Although Na Yuniu is small, her appetite is not small. In the morning, she needs at least a bowl of egg flowers and a bowl of porridge, and a vegetable steamed bun as big as a baby's fist. Niu said seriously, I'm really full. If I eat a little more, I might vomit. For rural families, the most important thing is eating. The child who has always been the most active in eating suddenly said that he couldn't eat anymore. Zhang Yuniang was naturally worried. She reached out and touched Niu Niu's forehead. The temperature seemed normal. Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? Do you have a headache or dizziness? Do you want to sleep? Listening to Zhang Yuniang's series of questions, Niu Niu shook her head and said, I'm not feeling uncomfortable, but my stomach said that I really can't eat anymore. Zhang Yuniang's heart was still hanging, and she asked again, don't you want to eat porridge and vegetable steamed buns? It's my fault. I make this every day. Are you tired of it? Niu Niu shook her head and said, the breakfast made by my mother is the most delicious. Niu Niu will never get tired of it. Zhang Yuniang thought about it, turned and walked into the house, and took out a piece of fragrant soft cake. Niu Niu didn't take it and said, Mom, if you give it to me, I will spit it out. It's a waste. I may have to wait a while before I can eat. Zhang Yuniang had no choice but to put away the soft cake, but she was caught by Gu Zhao, who had just gotten up. There is something good to eat, Gu Zhao cheered and immediately surrounded Zhang Yuniang and asked for food. Zhang Yuniang was so annoyed that she divided the soft cake into 3 parts. Gu Zhao's 1/3 was almost devoured as soon as he got it. Then he looked at the remaining 2/3 with eager eyes, but Zhang Yuniang had no intention of breaking the rules. Gu Zhao saw that it was time to eat, so he jumped up and said, I'll go call my eldest brother to eat. After Gu Yan came in, Gu Zhao immediately circled around his eldest brother like a little tail, and kept glancing at the cake. Gu Yan was the eldest brother after all. His habit of taking care of his younger brother for many years made him want to hand over his 1/3 of the cake to Gu Zhao. Don't share with him, don't let him get into the habit of asking for food, Zhang Yuniang stopped him. Gu Yan sighed and gave Gu Zhao a helpless look, but he didn't eat the cakes. Instead, he wrapped them in a handkerchief and put them in his pocket, explaining to his mother, my son will eat after he is tired from studying in the morning. Although Gu Zhao was greedy, he had to save face and would not ask his sister for food. Instead, he urged Niu Niu, eat quickly, I just tasted it, it's delicious. Niu Niu shook her head helplessly. Zhang Yuniang also wrapped up her daughter's share and stuffed it into the small purse on Niu Niu's waist. She also reminded Gu Zhao, don't coax your sister to eat snacks, remember. Gu Zhao raised his head and chest and said, Mom, who are you looking down on? I am a brother, a real man, I can't protect my sister in time, how can I snatch her food? Of course, if his sister took the initiative to share his food, he would not be stupid enough to refuse. After breakfast, Zhang Yuniang hurriedly washed the dishes and invited Lu Xiru over, sister, please help me take care of the 2 older ones, I will take Niu Niu to the clinic. When Lu Xiru heard that Niu Niu needed to see a doctor, she was more anxious than Zhang Yuniang, and asked repeatedly, what's wrong with my baby? Where is he uncomfortable? Sister, do you have enough money? If not, spend my money first. Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but laugh, but in the end, Lu Xiru's panicked look diluted her inner worries. Can't eat? Lu Xiru didn't feel relieved after hearing this explanation, but said, can't eat is a big deal. Sister, take her to the clinic. Of course, according to Lu Xiru's concern for Niu Niu, Niu Niu's broken skin on her hand might also be a big deal. The clinic was not far away, and the doctor's pulse diagnosis results came out quickly. The child is fine, just eats less, it shouldn't be a big deal, the old doctor said. Zhang Yuniang was still worried. After all, her daughter couldn't eat immediately after she made a wish in her dream. Who knows if she still has a hidden disease? The old doctor said, now the child can run and jump, and the pulse is also very stable. If she still eats less in a few days, you can bring her here again. Zhang Yuniang hurriedly asked, how many days are in a few days? The old doctor thought for a while and said, 5 days. Zhang Yuniang took out her purse to pay the consultation fee and grabbed a handful of copper coins. The old doctor hurriedly said, "The child is not sick, why should I pay?" Zhang Yuniang still insisted on paying. The old doctor said, "Neighbors come to see a doctor, as long as there is nothing wrong, I won't charge you for the consultation fee. Don't break my rules." Zhang Yuniang gave up. Na Yuniu looked at the scene and felt very familiar, as if it had happened before. She tilted her head and said skillfully, "Thank you, Dr. Grandpa, I wish you a long life." Although the old doctor was not the same person as the doctor in the town before, there was no old man who didn't like to hear this. Hearing this, he smiled and said, "You little kid is so sweet. Grandpa also wishes you good health and peace." Zhang Yuniang took the child out of the clinic and couldn't help but sighed, "Na Yuniu is really amazing. She doesn't spend money every time she goes to the clinic." Na Yuniu grinned and said, "The old man with white beard told me that I don't have to take bitter medicine." Zhang Yuniang was shocked. She didn't know that she could make a wish for such a thing. Doesn't it mean that Na Yuniu will always be healthy? When she returned to the rental house, Lu Xiru was relieved to know that Na Yuniu was fine. Gu Zhao cheered and pulled his sister to find insects. Gu Yan glanced at his mother, then followed with a book. After he was out of the adult's sight, Gu Yan took out the 1/3 piece of cake in the morning, divided it into two, and handed it to his younger brother and sister. "Eat it quickly," Gu Yan urged. Gu Zhao's movements were quicker than anyone else's, but Niu Niu didn't take it, but said, "I really can't eat it, I'll vomit it out if I eat it." Gu Yan touched her head and asked, "Does it hurt?" Niu Niu shook her head and said, "No, I'm just a little greedy, maybe it will be better in a few days. Brother, you eat quickly, I'll give you some too." Gu Zhao looked at the cakes that Niu Niu took out of her purse and couldn't help swallowing again. Gu Yan glanced at the stupid brother who was almost drooling at the side, and thought to himself, brats are really not as good as the obedient and soft sister. Second update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 57. Gu Mingda had his second exam, and there were still many problems on the road, but everyone arrived at the exam room unscathed. They were terrified all the way, always on guard against unexpected accidents that might happen somewhere, because their minds were elsewhere, which diluted everyone's nervousness about the exam. These people did not rush into the exam room, but instead pulled Gu Mingda and said, "Brother Gu, in the last exam, because of your encouragement, I was able to concentrate on the exam room. In fact, when I came to the capital this time, my teacher did not think highly of me, but I came here. Brother Gu, can you say a few more words this time?" The expressions of the others at this time were similar, and they all looked at Gu Mingda expectantly, hoping that he could say something encouraging. Gu Mingda felt amused, but he didn't refuse. He coughed and said, "Everyone, the difficulties have been overcome, and the road ahead is clear. What is there to fear? The fame of a scholar is within your reach. Show your skills today. Brother Gu is right." After a generous speech, the people present were excited again. They put their moods in order, carried their exam baskets, and walked into the examination room with their chests held high. The soldiers in charge of the inspection couldn't help but be stunned by the momentum of these people, and their movements of inspection became much lighter. The previous exam had eliminated most of the people, and the seats were rearranged for this exam. Compared with the previous exam, Gu Mingda's mentality was slightly relaxed, and he still got a normal seat. After studying for more than 20 years, for Gu Mingda, many knowledge had long been familiar, and he answered the questions in one go. After copying the test paper, he handed it in and left without staying in the examination room for too long. The sky was gray in the morning, but it was clear in the afternoon. Gu Mingda walked briskly on the streets of the city. He was not in a hurry to go home, but walked for a long time before going back. Mom, Dad is back. Gu Zhao, who was playing in the corner of the yard, ran to inform Zhang Yuniang the moment he saw Gu Mingde. Zhang Yuniang pulled Na Yuniu out to greet him. Gu Mingde handed the exam basket to his eldest son Gu Yan, bent down and picked up Na Yuniu, and asked, "Did Na Yuniu have fun at home today?" Na Yuniu tilted her body and said, "Not particularly happy." Gu Mingde asked casually, but he didn't expect this answer. He looked at his wife with surprise. Zhang Yuniang sighed and said, "The child ate little today and didn't like to move much. She got up too early in the morning. I wanted to coax her to sleep for a while at noon, but my mouth was dry from singing, and she couldn't sleep. I also consulted a doctor, who said that it was nothing serious." Gu Mingde reached out and touched Na Yuniu's forehead. After confirming that it was not hot, he breathed a sigh of relief. Zhang Yuniang whispered about Na Yuniu's dream in the morning. Knowing that his wife had already reminded their daughter, he didn't say the same thing a second time. Even though he and his wife had told Na Yuniu many times about this matter, the child was full of hope that her parents would get what they wanted, so she couldn't help but want to share more of her parents' burden. While he felt warm, he also felt that he couldn't let it go any longer. Na Yuniu's initiative should never be used. Gu Mingde didn't have the heart to be cruel to the child. He just said to Na Yuniu, "Na Yuniu doesn't eat well and doesn't sleep well. Daddy feels very uncomfortable. You are like this because of Daddy, so Daddy will accompany Na Yuniu." Gu Mingde was afraid that Na Yuniu would forget and make random wishes, so he did what he said. He ate as much as Na Yuniu ate for dinner. The appetite of an adult man is naturally not comparable to that of a 5-year-old girl. However, the tall Gu Mingde endured the hunger and almost copied Na Yuniu's eating movements one by one, and only ate a few mouthfuls of food. In Na Yuniu's heart, eating is a big deal. She is not unaware of Gu Mingde's appetite in the past. Seeing this scene, she can only try to shovel more food into her mouth. But while eating, Na Yuniu suddenly stopped. Gu Mingde was the first to notice her abnormality and asked, "What's wrong?" Na Yuniu jumped off the chair, trotted out the door, found a deserted corner in the yard, squatted down and vomited. This made the couple feel very distressed. Gu Mingde picked her up and said, "I'll take her to see a doctor." "No need," Na Yuniu said loudly, with a full of energy, not at all like she had just vomited. Facing her parents' puzzled eyes, Na Yuniu explained, I just ate too much, I don't feel uncomfortable at all, just drink some water." Zhang Yuniang took the warm water handed over by Guyan and fed it to her daughter in small sips. Niu Niu really seemed to have just spit out 2 mouthfuls of food. In this state, she was able to find time to whisper to Guyan, "Thank you, big brother, for pouring me some water." Gu Zhao, who was standing by, felt uncomfortable when he saw that his big brother got a thank you, but he didn't. He thought about it, took out a dirty handkerchief from his body and handed it to Niu Niu, "Wipe it quickly, your mouth is a little dirty." Niu Niu looked at this black and yellow handkerchief with all kinds of strange dirty things mixed on it. She prepared herself for a long time. In the end, she couldn't bear to disappoint her brother, and trembled as she tried to take it. Zhang Yuniang took the handkerchief first and said to Gu Zhao, "Okay, I know you care about your sister. Such a dirty handkerchief will get dirtier the more you wipe it." Gu Zhao smiled embarrassedly. Niu Niu said, "Third brother, thank you too." Gu Zhao was a big-hearted person. He felt it was fair to be thanked, and he didn't insist on letting Niu Niu use his handkerchief. In the end, it was Gu Mingde who took out his handkerchief to help Niu Niu dry her mouth. Zhang Yuniang reached out and gently poked Niu Niu's forehead, nagging, "If you knew you were going to vomit, you shouldn't have eaten. Why are you making things so difficult for yourself?" Niu Niu looked apologetic, "It's my fault, Mom, don't be angry." Gu Mingde explained for his daughter, "Niu Niu did it for me. She was afraid that I would be hungry if I didn't eat enough." Zhang Yuniang was slightly stunned when she heard this. Niu Niu said a little embarrassedly, "I'm so stupid. I wanted Dad to eat more, but I didn't expect to hurt myself. Raising a child is like carefully caring for a delicate flower. It takes extremely patient watering and cultivation before the flowers bloom and bear fruit." Because of Niu Niu's unfortunate experience in the Zhang family for 5 years, Gu Mingde always has more patience with her. Dad is an adult. He won't starve to death if he eats one more or one less bite, Gu Mingde said. Niu Niu shook her head, "I won't starve to death, but it will be very uncomfortable." Gu Mingde said softly, "The discomfort of being hungry is not more uncomfortable than vomiting. Daddy is an adult and will not be defeated by such a small matter. Niu Niu, you must remember, never hurt yourself for others, even for someone you care about very much. Before trying to protect others, Niu Niu must protect herself first." First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 58. Niu couldn't sleep at night, and Gu Mingde stayed up with her even if he was very sleepy. No matter how distressed Niu was, Gu Mingde still insisted on this punishment. This state of not having enough to eat and not being able to sleep lasted for several days. Niu didn't have any big changes, but Gu Mingde lost a lot of weight and had dark circles under his eyes. When eating breakfast that day, Niu's head was banging like a chicken pecking at rice, but she still managed to eat the food in front of her one bite after another. "If you can't eat it, don't eat it," Zhang Yuniang said distressedly. Niu shook her head and said, "I seem to be able to eat a lot again." She ate a large bowl of rice and felt a long-lost sense of security in her stomach. Zhang Yuniang gently touched Niu's round belly and asked, "Niu, are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere? You must tell your mother if you feel uncomfortable, and don't hold on." Niu shook her little head and said, "I don't feel uncomfortable at all, I just want to sleep. I just had a full stomach, so I have to wait a while before going to bed," Gu Mingde reminded. After Niu yawned heavily, she stretched out her two little hands and rubbed her face vigorously, using this stupid method to refresh herself. "Gu Yan, Gu Zhao, take Niu to play in the yard for a while and then come back to sleep," Zhang Yuniang warned her two sons. After the three children were no longer in the house, Zhang Yuniang looked at her husband distressedly and said, "You must be very hungry these days. I will give you a bowl of noodles later." Gu Mingde was indeed very hungry, but no matter how uncomfortable and hungry he was, he did not secretly turn on the small stove, but relied on his breath to support himself until now. Now that Niu has recovered, he did not refuse the bowl of noodles. He only said, "I hope she can have a longer memory this time and stop thinking about sacrificing herself for others." Zhang Yuniang said sourly, "If she didn't like you, she wouldn't dream about you failing to get first place in the exam." Gu Mingde liked hearing this kind of words, and his face became visibly happy as he said, "Whether I do well in the exam or not is my business, and I need her help wherever I need it." But if you think about it carefully, raising a daughter is indeed different from raising a son. Brats don't think so carefully. Gu Zhao knows how to eat and play with bugs every day. Zhang Yuniang didn't bother to expose his partiality, but instead echoed, "Every time I see Gu Zhao getting into trouble, the anger in my heart keeps rising. I don't know how much effort it takes not to hit him, but Niu makes some mistakes." No, she looked at me pitifully, and I couldn't bear to say anything. The couple seemed to be able to talk about their daughter for 3 days and 3 nights, and even gradually developed in an outrageous direction. "Her eyes are like yours, they are so clear and watery. I have never seen eyes that are prettier than yours," Gu Mingde praised the two of them in one breath. Zhang Yuniang nodded and said, "Her eyebrows are thick and curved, exactly like yours." Gu Mingde added, "She is also very good at reading and very diligent. She knows how to review by herself without being reminded. If this is a boy, he will probably be able to try it out after 3 years of teaching, and then he will be the youngest scholar in this dynasty. Zhang Yuniang completely forgot that Niunia was an adopted child and had no blood relationship with them. She said, "This child simply combines all the advantages of both of us." The couple spent the whole morning praising their children. After lunch, Gu Mingde took a deep nap and vaguely made up for the sleep he had lost in the past few days. After he got up, he saw Zhang Yuniang sitting in the shade of a tree embroidering a handkerchief. He strode over and inserted a silver hairpin into her bun. "Do you like it?" Gu Mingde asked softly. Zhang Yuniang was stunned, and took off the hairpin to take a look. The silver hairpin was in the style of a red plum announcing good news, and it looked very delicate. She didn't ask about the price, but asked with a smile, "When did you buy it?" "I didn't see you going out." Gu Mingde explained, "I bought it on the day after the exam, and I got the money back." Mulazai is another name for pepper. This dynasty cannot produce pepper and must rely on merchants from the western regions to import it. The price used to be comparable to gold. Although it is not that expensive now, it is still not cheap and is often out of stock. Zhang Yuniang was shocked and asked, "How did you get it? Didn't you say you have to wait at least half a month for the goods to be available?" Gu Mingde explained, "It's a coincidence. I asked casually that day, but I didn't expect that someone ordered the goods but regretted it, so the shopkeeper sold it to me." Some time ago, Zhang Yuniang went out almost every day, occasionally going to the medicine shop and occasionally the grocery store. Like ants moving, she finally gathered the ingredients needed for the braised food recipe. "Now that I have the pepper, I have gathered all the ingredients. I've spent a lot of money buying these things before I even started business. I don't know if I can make the money back," Zhang Yuniang said worriedly. Gu Mingde comforted him, "In business, there are profits and losses. If you lose this time, you can make it back next time." He took out 6 more red strings and handed them to his wife, and said, "I went shopping that day and didn't buy anything suitable for the 2 brats. But the little tug-toe on Niu Niu's head would definitely be suitable if tied with a red string. Let's look back. Find a reason to tie her up." These things were supposed to be given to his wife and daughter after the exam, but at that time he was angry with Niu Niu for not eating or sleeping, and it was difficult to take them out, so he postponed them until now. Zhang Yuniang looked at the red rope and was speechless. How could anyone buy 6 red ropes at a time? She was afraid that her daughter would not replace them. He was the one who took the initiative to be fair to his children before, but now he is the one who is secretly partial. But Zhang Yuniang didn't say anything. After putting away the 6 red ropes, she began to think of some reasons to coax Niu. At this time, in the closed examination hall, a group of people were busy marking the second test papers. A clerk was holding a pile of test papers and walking hurriedly in the aisle. When he turned the corner, he bumped into another person who was walking hurriedly. Under the collision, the test papers in his arms fell to the ground, and one of them was even broken so that the whole paper was spread out on the ground. The person who was hit was under the force, and his right foot was about to step on the spread test paper. Suddenly, his left leg twitched without any warning, and the whole person fell to one side uncontrollably, and his legs bent directly, and he knelt heavily on the spread test paper. "Are you okay? Where did you fall?" The clerk was very anxious after bumping into someone, and hurriedly helped the other person up. The man grimaced in pain in his knees. He stayed there for a long time but still couldn't recover. He lifted his clothes and took a look. His knees were already bruised. "Wait here for a while. I'll send the test paper to Lord Chen, and then I'll send you back to rest," the clerk said apologetically. They were all colleagues, so the other party didn't care and waved his hand to signal him to take care of himself first. The clerk picked up the test papers on the ground one by one, and his eyes fell on the open test paper where his colleague knelt before. "The handwriting is really beautiful," he couldn't help but sigh. The colleague was a little proud when he heard the words, and hurried over, nodded, and said, It's really neat. I almost stepped on it. If I really stepped on it, I guess Lord Chen would be unhappy. Lord Chen is the chief examiner of this college examination. This lord has always loved cleanliness. Even if he knew that the paper was stepped on by them, he would probably feel unlucky, and it would be difficult for this candidate to get a good score. The clerk casually put this test paper on the top. When the test paper was delivered to Lord Chen's desk, he had just finished marking the other test papers on hand. He casually picked up the top one from the pile of test papers, just took a look, and was stunned. Then he looked at it carefully, clapped his hands and praised, "Beautiful." The results of the second round of the college examination will determine who can become a scholar. It is more strict than the first round. The previous single-person marking was changed to a joint review by 7 people. Originally, everyone was very tired from marking. After hearing this, they immediately put down their work and came together. What's beautiful? Is the article particularly well written? Lord Chen shook his head and said, the handwriting is good, quite like the style of a calligrapher, and the article is also good, with excellent arguments and a smooth flow. One of the examiners suddenly said, I know this character. The first place in the first exam is called Gu Mingde. Second update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 59. Mr. Chen also remembered this person. In the first exam, he could not look at the papers of other people, but he had to look at the papers of the top candidate. At this time, he could not help but sigh, I felt that this person was talented in the first exam. Now after looking at the second exam, he is really an extraordinary talent. Other people also recognized Gu Mingde's talent, and nodded when they heard it. Mr. Chen said again, this person has great talent. If there is no better paper in the back, I want to select him as the first in this exam. What do you think? The chief examiner has spoken, and the other deputy examiners will not speak up to be the bad guy, not to mention that Gu Mingde's answer sheet is indeed well written, and this case is also worthy of the title. In a blink of an eye, it was the day of the announcement of the results. The courtyard of MRSGN's house was empty early in the morning. Even the busiest housewife would accompany her husband to the outside of the government office to look at the list on this day. The 5 members of the Gu family, including Lu Ziru, saw a large crowd of people gathered under the list before they arrived at the gate of the government office. Dad, are you taking the exam with so many people? Niu suddenly asked. Gu Mingde was stunned when he heard this and explained, there were 2,000 candidates in the first round of the college exam, 600 candidates in the second round, and finally 300 candidates were selected as scholars. Niu widened her eyes and said, Dad is really amazing, he beat the first 1,400 people. No, Dad got the first place in the first round, which means he beat 2,000 people. Gu Mingde was a little surprised and praised, Niu, getting the first place in the first round does not mean that you can get the first place in the second round, you can't count it that way. Niu was about to say that she had discussed the first place with the old man with white beard, but she changed her mind and thought that Dad didn't like her to make random wishes, so she didn't mention it, and only said, anyway, Daddy won the first place in the first round. In Niu's heart, Daddy is the best. Gu Mingde tapped her pretty little nose and said, Niu is really good at arithmetic. Daddy will borrow Niu's good words and hope to be on the list today. Niu was a little proud, but she still said, this kind of arithmetic is something that even children can do. It's nothing. Gu Zhao, who was standing by, was stunned when he heard it and asked, when did Daddy beat 1,400 people, and when did he beat 2,000 people? What arithmetic? What should I calculate? Everyone couldn't help laughing when they saw that Gu Zhao not only couldn't figure it out, but also couldn't understand the questions. Gu Yan has always been a careful and considerate elder brother. He pulled Gu Zhao and explained it to him in detail. Gu Yan explained it 3 times before Gu Zhao finally understood it. He didn't have any jealousy for his sister's intelligence. He just touched the back of his head and said innocently, "Sister is also very good." The more anxious the candidates were waiting, the slower the results were released. What's wrong with the people in the government office today? Why haven't they announced the results yet at this time? Have they overslept? Someone couldn't help but complain. Coincidentally, as soon as the person finished speaking, there was a commotion in front. "The results have been announced, the results have been announced." Hearing this voice, all the people around squeezed forward. The children of the Gu family also wanted to squeeze in, but were pulled back by Gu Mingde and Zhang Yuniang. "There are so many people, be careful of trampling," Lu Xiru warned loudly. She focused her eyes on Na Yuniu and Zhang Yuniang at the first moment of the commotion. Seeing Zhang Yuniang holding Na Yuniu and hiding behind, Lu Xiru immediately breathed a sigh of relief. It seems much easier to retreat than to squeeze forward. The whole family looked at the crowd that was still squeezing forward on the street, and looked at the huge number of heads, and even had a feeling of surviving a disaster. "Na Yuniu, how are you? Are you not hurt?" Zhang Yuniang looked Na Yuniu up and down. Just when she was trying to squeeze out, she seemed to hear Na Yuniu scream. Na Yuniu shook her head and said, "Mom, I don't know who pulled my hair just now." Zhang Yuniang looked at Na Yuniu's head again. The amount of hair seemed to have not changed, but there were 2 fewer red strings on her head. Because Gu Mingde bought 6 red hair strings, Zhang Yuniang did not feel tired these days and tied 6 small tufts on her head every day. Lu Xiru also remembered Na Yuniu's hairstyle and cursed on the spot, "Who is so petty that he wants to snatch the red hair string of a child, and he is not afraid of tripping over stones while walking." Zhang Yuniang was very angry at first, but seeing Lu Xiru so angry, she hurriedly comforted her, "If you lose 2, there are still 4. As long as the child is not seriously injured, it's a small matter." Zhang Yuniang took out a small comb from her arms and combed Na Yuniu's hair again. Na Yuniu leaned on her arms obediently, and her motionless appearance looked very obedient. "Wow!" Gu Zhao suddenly cried. Everyone looked at him with worry. "My purse was stolen. It was the one my mother made for me," Gu Zhao cried. Gu Mingde sighed and said, "Every time the results are announced, there are always some people who take advantage of the situation to fish in troubled waters. I didn't expect that this time they were so bad that they even stole from children." Seeing Gu Zhao so sad, Zhang Yuniang softened her heart and comforted her youngest son, saying, "This one is lost. I will make another one for you later." Gu Zhao still cried hard and said, "The rest of the purse is lost, but my favorite General Jin. It hasn't been with me for a few days, and it was stolen." Woo woo woo. Zhang Yuniang suddenly felt that the touch in her heart faded away like a tide, and she felt choked. Lu Xiru was puzzled and asked, "Sister, what is General Jin?" Zhang Yuniang said unhappily, "He has a cricket that makes a lot of noise every day, which makes people have headaches." Gu Zhao was not convinced when he heard this, and said, "General Jin is the best cricket, it is very obedient, mother, don't say that to it." Zhang Yuniang was too lazy to pay attention to him, and turned her head to concentrate on combing her daughter's hair. The thief who was mixed in the crowd took advantage of the chaos of the announcement of the results to touch many people's pockets, holding a lot of things in his arms, and struggled to squeeze out of the crowd. "2 red ropes, just right to go back and coax my little girl," the thief thought so, took 2 steps forward, and suddenly fell to the ground uncontrollably, hitting his head on the ground, knocking out a big hole. After the thief got up from the ground, he immediately cursed, "Unlucky, why is there a stumbling block hidden in the grass? If Gu Mingde was here, I'm afraid he would find the stone hidden in the grass very familiar." The thief reached out and touched his forehead, which was covered with blood. He didn't dare to stay here and hurried to the corner. 7, 8, 9 purses. I'm rich. The thief counted his achievements and poured out the things in his purse one by one. But the more he poured, the uglier his face became. What the hell, just this little money. There were only a few copper coins in several purses, and he was really poor. The last purse, it's full, there must be a lot of good things in it. The thief opened the last purse with excitement. The next second, more than a dozen crickets jumped out of the purse at the same time. He was too close, and one of them even jumped directly into his mouth. The thief cursed again, "Pot, pot, pot." Which normal person's purse doesn't contain silver but crickets, and they only do these wicked things. The first update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 60. The first name is Gu Mingda. Where is this Gu Mingda from? I know Gu Mingda. He's from our Guang'an County, and he also won the first place in the first competition. Even though the Gu family was standing far away from the list, they heard the noise coming from there. Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but ask, did I hear it wrong? I seem to have heard my husband's name. Lu Xiru pricked up her ears and quietly walked forward for a few steps. Then she returned with a blushing face and shouted excitedly to Zhang Yuniang and Na Yuniu, they did say the name of brother-in-law. Brother-in-law is the first name. Really, the first one. My sister is a scholar's wife. Our girl is a scholar's wife. If someone who didn't know about her excited look saw her, they would probably think that she was the one who wanted to be a scholar. Zhang Yuniang turned back to look at Gu Mingda. She and Gu Mingda have been married for more than 10 years. She has watched Gu Mingda succeed for so many years. No one understands the difficulties and hardships of this journey better than her. "Ms. Sir, you really passed the exam," Zhang Yuniang said and couldn't help but shed tears. Gu Mingda may have been disappointed too many times, but when he suddenly learned that he had finally taken a step forward, he felt as if he was seeing flowers in a fog. At this time, a young man with disheveled hair squeezed out of the crowd. There were a few more holes in his clothes and one shoe was missing from his feet. But his face was full of undisguised excitement, and he shouted and jumped, "I passed the exam. I am a scholar. I am a scholar." The young man shouted, and suddenly saw Gu Mingda standing there not far from the crowd with empty eyes. He quickly stopped jumping around, stood there and straightened his clothes, then took a few steps forward and looked at Gu Mingda. Mingda stopped in front of him. This young man who was so excited that he went crazy was none other than Zheng Qi, who had befriended Gu Mingda during the first exam. He was also the only one in the 5-member team who was admitted as a scholar besides Gu Mingda. "Brother Gu, I have been admitted as a scholar. Although I am ranked among more than 200 people, I am not as top as Brother Gu. But now I can finally go home and give an explanation to my parents. In order to support me in studying these years, they have cited my brother and sister-in-law are very dissatisfied." Zheng Qi recounted the hard work of studying for many years and couldn't help but shed tears. "In the future, even if I fail to pass the exam, I can still open a private school to teach and support my family, and my parents don't have to suffer like me." When Zheng Qi mentioned the future, his eyes were full of longing. Scholars have made a qualitative leap compared to Tongsheng. This is just the lowest level of fame, but they already have the privilege of rent-free 6 acres of land a year, and the privilege of not kneeling before officials. Although outsiders shout that poor scholars are poor because they continue to rush for exams. If they give up taking the exams, they can find a good job at any time and ensure that their family has enough food and clothing. Zheng Qi's appearance at this time was almost the epitome of all the people present who had passed the examination. Although Gu Mingda won the first place, he was not very happy in his heart. Although his years of depression did not defeat him, it made him fall into a certain ideological dead end. On the one hand, I was unwilling to give up the scientific examination, but on the other hand, I had a vague feeling that I would eventually fail the exam and get nothing. At this time, he was finally admitted as a scholar. He felt like the high wall that had imprisoned him for many years suddenly collapsed. He finally broke free from the shackles, broke the invisible shackles, and could take a step forward to face a more complicated future. Zheng Qi may give up and continue to take the entrance exam, but Gu Mingde is already very determined. He has never realized his ambitions so clearly as at this moment. He loves his family, wants to accompany his wife, and witness the growth of his children, but he also wants to go to the capital, wants to show off his ambitions, and wants to take them to see the new world. A bright future. Gu Mingde turned around and looked behind him. The two children, Gu Zhao and Niu Niu, were shouting with excitement at this time. "Daddy is the number one, Daddy is the number one." Gu Mingde didn't show off his madness, but the two children did it for him. "The wind has picked up, let's go back first," Gu Mingde said softly to his wife. Zhang Yuniang was stunned and asked, "Don't you get together with them?" If the husband is admitted as a scholar, it stands to reason that he should get together with other candidates who have also been admitted as a scholar, so that they can bond with each other. Gu Mingde shook his head and said, "Instead of bragging and drinking with them, I would rather go back and accompany you. No matter what, it would be good to read a few more pages." Zheng Qi on the side heard this, and his original intention of inviting people to drink and celebrate suddenly stopped. The top-ranked person had to go back to study. He, a young scholar ranked low, had no reason not to work hard. Zheng Qi immediately resigned and did not agree to the invitations from other scholars. He quickly returned to his residence and continued studying hard. Some families were happy and some were sad. Gu Mingde passed the exam, but Wang Yazu failed. Perhaps the reconciliation with Lu Xiru before the exam seriously affected his mentality. Wang Yazu, who was supposed to pass the exam at the end of the exam, was restless throughout the exam. He barely passed the second exam, but was rejected. He was rejected in the Yamen. I searched over and over again on the list, but couldn't find my name. Impossible, impossible, I should be able to pass the exam, I should be able to pass the exam. Wang Yazu muttered to himself. His dejected look attracted ridicule from the scholar next to him who also failed. "You think you should be able to pass the exam, and I also think I should be able to pass the exam. Why don't you say that the examiner is your father? You can do whatever you want." Wang Yazu was furious when he heard this and couldn't help but want to refute, but when he looked up, he saw that the mocking scholar was surprisingly strong, 9 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a strong body. He couldn't even beat Lu Xiru, and it was likely that he couldn't beat the tough scholar in front of him. He could only look at him angrily and left in disgrace. When the Gu family returned to the house, the yard was empty, with few people at all. Obviously, most people were still watching the excitement at the list. Even MRSGN was not at home at this time, and she took her grandson to an unknown place. In this case, any movement in the yard seemed extremely noisy. "Where did you get the silk flower on your head? Tell me, tell me. Did the wild man outside give it to you? You are a bitch." Zhang Guangzhou cursed very dirty and loudly. Zhang Yuniang hurriedly covered Niuniu's ears, and Gu Mingde was a step slower and turned around to cover Gu Zhao's ears. Gu Yan was already very skilled at lowering his head and covering his ears, and he didn't need his parents to remind him at all. But Lu Xiru, the 6th person in the Gu family, opened her big eyes at this time and walked towards the backyard lightly and quickly. Niuniu arched her little body towards the backyard, obviously wanting to run after Lu Xiru. Zhang Yuniang found it funny and said, "Some excitement is not for children to watch." Niuniu immediately tilted her head and asked innocently, "If children can't watch it, can older children like the eldest and third brothers watch it?" Second update.